There are 3 facts I have to preface this video with, the first being that I just finished reading Azuko Yuzuki's Butter, which is fresh as butter in my head. 2, for the past several months on TikTok and Instagram, my feeds have been inundated with videos of women eating an amount of food that would have sent King Henry VIII into heart palpitations. And 3, in my last semester at university, I was struck horrifically ill with a gastrointestinal sickness, which caused me to inadvertently lose 25 to 30 pounds. This was after having been what I consider to be a standard weight my entire life, until I realized, of course, that there is no standard weight for a woman unless you are unequivocally thin. And all these facts have combined in my head to form a delicious and pertinent souffle, which I now give to you under the title How Azuko Yuzuki's Butter Taught Me to Hate Mukbangs. Azuko Yuzuki's Butter centers on Japanese journalist Rika, who has been tasked with interviewing female serial killer Kaji in a Silence of the Lambs-esque conversation that spans across multiple months. Now, Kaji is notably a fat female serial killer, a fact which has garnered her much derision from Japanese social media, almost as much for her bloodthirstiness and having supposedly killed 3 men. Rika, for her part, is thin, but this has quite literally been a labor of love for her. Growing up in her all-girls school, she was on the receiving end of a lot of sapphic attention from her classmates who were starved of a male love object. They adored her in particular for her boyish and princely frame, which in adulthood now manifests as Rika continuously trying to maintain a 50-kilogram weight at 5'3". Under Kaji's tutelage, Rika packs more and more weight as the novel progresses, as a side effect of having sensually engaged in the world for the very first time. And though the narrative never frames either of their weights as being born of gluttony, the way that Yuzuki talks about both of their non-standard weights is incredibly telling. Kaji presents herself as a liberated feminine woman, freed from the shackles of Japanese ascetic, self-depriving diets, but this is also that she can appeal to what she thinks men truly desire, beyond how 21st century Japanese media has brainwashed them into accepting an ungenerous thinness as a moral principle and aesthetic ideal. Rika's weight gain, as it unfolds throughout the novel, is born out of a desire not just to appeal and cater to the whims and desires of others, but to serve both herself and her community. In this way, while Kaji pontificates and philosophizes about food quite often, it's Rika who's committing praxis, unshackling food from its historic bondage as a woman's realm, and instead opting to treat it as the act of creation and self-discovery it is. In this way, the core conflict of the novel is not the superficial sapphic-tinged manipulations that occur between Kaji and Rika, but rather a philosophical stand against the notion that food should be used as an abusive and hierarchical tool. Ultimately, Butter argues that food is intrinsically good, not just as an affirmation of our desires, not just as a way to nourish our bodies, not just as a way to strengthen the ties that bond, but as an amalgamation of all of these things and more. It is not and should not be treated as the birch rod that sits in the school mistress's closet. Food is quite literally the carrot rather than the stick. Mukbangs take this notion to its natural extreme, in doing so perverting the core message of communality and self-discovery, and render food a woman's realm once more, wherein they have to cater to the desires of an invisible voyeur. I know what you're thinking. What about Nikocado Avocado? What about Eric the Electrician? 2 of the most well-paid mukbangers who just so happen to be men. But those men are outliers. If you search up the word mukbang on TikTok, the first 100 results that you get will be invariably of women, with around 3 to 4 men thrown in here and there for good measure. This is ultimately because mukbangers make their content for 3 demographics. 1, feeders who want to see a pretty woman engorge herself on food. 2, young people with eating disorders, a demographic that has historically and contemporaneously been women, to stave off their appetites by having the mirror neurons in their heads fire at the sight of somebody doing the act which they themselves cannot. And 3, the demographic that the majority of people who watch mukbangs will claim to be people who watch because they quite simply don't want to be lonely. In a way, it's not so outlandish or perverse a behavior to watch mukbangs. The human mind likes symmetry. Mirror neurons exist partially so that we're able to learn new behaviors, but also to allow us to feel empathy. They're the reason why when we're talking with someone with a different accent, we'll mimic their accent. Why, if somebody crosses their legs while we're in conversation with them, we too will subconsciously mimic their body language. Quite simply, we're social creatures. We want to be liked, and we also like it when people fall into synchronized movement. And regardless of your reason for watching them, whether to stave off loneliness, your own appetite, or for sexual titillation, the mukbang is seen as explicitly transgressive, and on paper it must be admitted that the act does seem pretty liberatory. A pretty young woman is eating a copious amount of food in the way that she likes it without a care in the world for how she's being perceived by other people. But when that same pretty young woman is incentivized through capitalistic revenues to perpetuate the behavior of eating an egregiously unhealthy and large amount of food, all for a voyeur's pleasure and to appeal to their pocketbook, looks? Doesn't that rob the act of some of its transgression? Doesn't eating on screen then just become another tentacle of capitalism, shackling this young woman into disordered eating? Even if it's only occasionally. Even if it's a clean mukbang, which I think that term is hyperbolic, but I digress. Doesn't the mukbang force her to be heedless of her own whims or tastes, because appealing to the whims and tastes of another person, whether sexual or platonic, whether man or woman, appealing to their whims and tastes is so much more profitable. Juxtapose that with butter, where the only time food is framed as a transgressive act is when Rika is saying that even if she ends up dying alone, she won't present people for it the way that men who expect women to cater to them seem to do. Instead, she'll use her own money to buy her own ingredients, make the food that she likes, when and how she likes it, and then die. While I do believe that mukbangs could have only been born of a 21st century modern society which incentivizes overconsumption as a lifestyle, heedless of the overarching ill effects it may have on the human body, it's not exactly a new concept. Take the land of cocaine, a medieval utopia where food and sex are plentiful. Gender roles are reversed, monks are getting it on with nuns. It's an all-around great time. However, in the land of cocaine, the things that money can afford, like food or like sex, are freed from the middleman of commerce. In this world, however, the only reason why mukbangs exist is to make a quick buck. It's because the mukbangers are hedging their bets that the amount of money that they spend on a copious amount of food is going to be surpassed by the net views that they reap. While I don't think that Azuko Yuzuki's intention while writing Butter was to fill her reader with a burgeoning hatred for mukbangs, I actually think it's a testament to the strength of her writing. Mukbangs subconsciously capitalize off of all of those endorphin-triggering behaviors that human beings love: eating, symmetry, intimacy, while absolving both mukbanger and viewer of having to undergo the burden of having a two-sided interaction. Mukbangs are a shiny plasticine farce of the behavior which has allowed human bonds to thrive so well up until the 21st century. A behavior which incentivizes us to eat with each other, both for the primitive reason of wanting to safeguard our resources from outside parties, as well as for that vague, socio-political, spiritual reason so poignantly touched upon in Christopher Stitcher's poem Our Beautiful Life when it's filled with shrieks, and what I think is Butter's strongest sentiment. I love you. I want us both to eat well.